Hi, this is Gwen Rouleau, and I am really excited to be able to share a bunch of photos with you from my trip to Asia in November of 2022. My husband and I went to Vietnam for a couple of weeks on a tour, and then I continued to three additional countries. And I feel very privileged to have had the opportunity to travel to Asia for that month, and I'm happy to share stories and photos with you. Is that good? Hi, I just wanted to show this map to you. So it shows you how we traveled from Minneapolis St. Paul International Airport to Seoul, Korea, over on the left-hand side of the screen. So that was an 18-hour flight. And after that, we got to Korea. Then it was going to Vietnam, which took another 4 or 5 hours. On the left-hand side here, you will see Pat, who was my bike tour guide in Cambodia, and Pan, who was our driver. He would follow along with a tuk-tuk or meet us at different places. So these are the two guides who I spent 5 days with in Cambodia. And these are my guides, Boon on the far right, who's about 33 years old, and she lives in Laos, and Yuli was my driver for the trip, the week long that I spent in Laos. This is another picture of Boon, my guide in Laos. This is just to give a highlight. So we arrived in Vietnam. At the bottom of the screen is Ho Chi Minh City, and we traveled 10 days north up to Hanoi. And then after that part of the trip in Vietnam, I traveled to Laos, Pak Se, Laos, and then to Cambodia, Siem Reap, and then to Bangkok, Thailand, and Phuket, Thailand. This is a photo of my bike guide, Pat. This is a photo of Pat in the center with his family. Pat was my my tour guide in Cambodia on the 5-day bike tour. So he sent me this photo of his family after we traveled together. When we were traveling, he would FaceTime with his kids, and I got to see them a little bit and learn a lot about his family. I learned a lot about his time as a child during the Khmer regime and how he was treated as a little boy and with his family, and their efforts now to come to the United States and get a visa. They're still working on that process. Here is a picture of the SUV that we traveled in Laos with, and this is a picture of the minivan on a ferry going across the Mekong. Here you have a picture of me and Kiki. Kiki was my tour guide in Bangkok. I spent about 18 hours in Bangkok running around and learning about lots of the temples, and Kiki showed me all around. You see this picture, we're without shoes because anytime you go into a temple, you have to remove your shoes. And here's a picture of the tuk-tuk. Pan is on the right-hand side. He was my driver for the days in Cambodia. And another picture of my guides and my driver in Cambodia. Part of the tour in Vietnam was a trip along the Mekong River, and this is two women who are using these long boats and rowing a group of us along into the villages. Here's a little video or a selfie of us on that longboat on the Mekong. So this picture is from Hoi An. Hoi An was a city that was really well known for the waterfront markets, and this is a common image along the waterfront. Hoi An is also very well known for the lanterns in their city. So this is some images you would see in Hoi An. This photo gives you a story of the very highly populated cities of Hanoi and Ho Chi Minh City, and the high number of two-wheeled scooters, bicycles, motorcycles in both of those cities. And in this picture, you see a mom and her child wearing face masks. And we asked about that when we were in Vietnam, and it's not so much for COVID. Well, we traveled there in November of 2022. The guide told us that it's more about population and pollution, that people are very concerned about that. And then the other thing is, I didn't get a good picture of this, but there were often times where we would see like a family of 4 or 5 on one two-wheeled motorcycle squeezed in and traveling the streets. It was kind of crazy. The upcoming slides are reflections of the Coochie tunnels. We're going to start with a video of um, one of the people on our tour who went into the Coochie tunnel. I didn't do that, but the Coochie tunnels are about 250 miles of underground network that the Viet Cong in Vietnam from 64 to 73, where they did a lot of operations during the war. Please note that these images coming ahead are difficult, and please take care of yourself how you would wish to be present or not for these images.
Got the video. Thank you so much. It was fun because they put you out, so that was so good. I see that. Yeah. Yeah.
Nice.
Yeah.
So this is a picture of my husband, John. He went through the Coochie tunnels. I get claustrophobia, so I did not participate. But here's a picture of him coming up out of the tunnel. The upcoming slides are photos of the War Remnants Museum and also the Hilton Hanoi, the prison with the French influence. And I just want to say that this is difficult to be present in the museums, the unspeakable harm to humans that took place. And the next slide will be about John McCain. So this is a photo of the chemical warfare and um, there are many images within the museum that talk about the generations harmed from the toxic chemicals that were used during war, both in Vietnam, several generations, and in our own country, the United States. So we visited a number of cultural sites. You know, some of their history is from the 7th century, 8th century, 11th, 13th. A very rich, very historical culture that we were able to visit. And this is the My Son Sanctuary, and you can see some images coming up. Part of our tour included a boat ride into Da Nang, which is a beautiful location where many tourists go to visit, and locals, tourists also. Important part of a boat ride in Vietnam is doing karaoke, which was an interesting thing. It wasn't really optional, I don't think. Anyway, and then they also provided some teaching how to make spring rolls. So this was a picture of that. The food in Vietnam was delicious. Um, there's not much more to be said. Really wonderful food. So I arrived in Paksay, Laos, and this is the hotel that I stayed in, and that transportation was common in the city of Laos. There were markets, and you'll see images coming ahead of temples and giving of alms of people in the on the city streets. So this is a picture I took from the hotel room of the monks, and there's a giving of alms. When I travel in the morning hours, I typically go for a walk, and I saw these chairs with all of these food items and things sitting out just unattended, and I was kind of curious what that was, and I learned that it was a holiday for then the monks would be coming along, and they would be kneeling and praying for them and offering things for the poor. So this is a picture I took from the hotel room of the monks, and there's a giving of alms. When I travel in the morning hours, I typically go for a walk, and I saw these chairs with all of these food items and things sitting out just unattended, and I was kind of curious what that was, and I learned that it was a holiday for then the monks would be coming along, and they would be kneeling and praying for them and offering things for the poor. So during our travels, we went into the mountainous regions in Laos, and this woman had a little sugarcane stand where you would take the sugarcane and run it through the machine, it would squeeze it all out, and it was delicious with a little bit of lime juice and some ice. And she allowed me to try to work her machine too. I share this photo with you because there were so few things in Laos that had any English words on it that this is the message to people. It says drugs are dangerous, users are insane, sellers are imprisoned, sufferers are parents, and people in the society. So this is a picture of the ferry. I'm sitting in the back seat of the minivan, and we're going to go across the Mekong River. And I remember as I was preparing for this trip, I did a lot of research about things to be concerned about. And, Laos isn't necessarily the most highly toured country because of its history and being a communist country. But so this ferry was coming across to pick us up, and it just didn't really look that safe. He had to make a couple of tries to really get the tires from the minivan to be situated to get safely across the ferry. But I looked at that, okay, this could be that pirate situation that I read about. The other concern they talked about is bandits along the trails in Cambodia and Laos, where people might do not such good things to you. So this is a beautiful picture just along the Mekong River, and for just for an understanding, like when we would go to the markets in Vietnam, there would be a lot of seafood, same in Laos. Just an incredible amount of fresh produce in both countries. But what I found to be interesting in Laos is that a lot of bugs and frogs and slugs and insects were available at the markets. I didn't see that so much in Vietnam. This is a photo as we traveled up into some mountainous ranges and looked at some waterfalls. But water buffalo were common around Laos, and this mama was pregnant, so she was able to be in the shade all day. So this is an elephant that I had an opportunity to ride when we were traveling up into the plateau in near the mountainous regions in Laos. We drove to this resort for where I was going to stay. When I stayed in Laos, I didn't stay with anyone else. I was always a bit by myself, and then my guide and the driver would stay somewhere else. And in this case, it was about 10 miles away that they were staying. They brought me to this resort, and I was the only person there. The driver, or this man on the elephant, asked me if I wanted to ride the elephant, and I had done some research before, and healthcare professionals here in America say you really shouldn't interact with wild animals in the jungle because if you needed healthcare, you'd need to be flown to Bangkok, which was a long ways away. Anyway, so this resort where I went to, there really hadn't been anyone since COVID, so they hadn't had full staffing. Nobody spoke English, and there was no Wi-Fi. But I went to my room. It was very, very calm and quiet, except for the Mekong River that was kind of rushing by, and then there were some waterfalls. Um, and at nighttime, I was told that there would be dinner at 7 p.m. So I walked about 100 yards in the dark and used my phone from my flashlight phone to get to the resort, and avoiding some bugs and insects along the way. And I went up to this lodge, and there was one table, and it said room 12, and that was where I stayed. There was no one else there, and there was a bottle of water, and then this woman who didn't speak English came and she brought me some food. And then I heard this motorcycle, and this woman came up into the resort, and she had been traveling. She was from France. She had been a nurse, and during COVID, she quit her job. She said it was way too much. So she and I enjoyed an evening together. She asked for a beer, and she was having a cigarette, and then she saw how much food they served me, and I said, "Would you please just join me?" And we just had a delightful time together, talking about our stories and travels. She actually was driving all by herself on a motorcycle through the mountains, and she got lost. Otherwise, she would have tried to make it there before dark. But it was a really wonderful story, and she and I have stayed in contact since then on WhatsApp. So that video was a picture of these gentlemen who are working and making these tools. What they do is they go into the Ho Chi Minh Trail and find all of the remnants of the war and use those materials to make these garden tools or kitchen tools. Cabbage. The two previous videos give you a feel for just the streets of that we traveled on to get up into the villages and then into the village, and the conditions and the primitive lifestyle that a lot of the folks in the village were living in. And my guide said a lot of these people, they have opportunities for more advancements and developments, but they choose to remain in these conditions without electricity and other resources. So this is a picture I took from the hotel room of the monks, and there's a giving of alms. When I travel in the morning hours, I typically go for a walk, and I saw all these chairs with all of these food items and things sitting out just unattended. And I was kind of curious what that was. And I learned that it was a holiday for then the monks would be coming along and they would be kneeling and praying for them and offering things for the poor. This is a home in one of the villages that we visited. So this would be an indication that there are three families who live in this home because there are three kitchens or three fires, stoves. And I think they were like 27 people who lived in this setting. So the slides ahead are going to be photos that I took during the part of the 5-day bike tour. This was starting in Angkor Wat. So we started our bike ride at like 4 in the morning. We had to meet so that we could try to get there by sunrise because there'd be this beautiful image at sunrise. Well, in this photo, as you can see, we had cloudy skies, so the sunrise wasn't all that remarkable. But part of that tour, it was a 200-kilometer, 5 days, and you're going to see some pictures of monks who were taking selfies within the Angkor Wat space, and there's images that I took of the movie Tomb Raider was filmed. I think Harrison Ford, one of the Raiders of the Lost Ark, or something like that. A lot of movies have been filmed in this historical area. People come from all over the world to see this historical site and the rich history. So part of this bike ride involved riding through the rice paddies and into the jungle and many different villages, a variety of communities that we passed through. But on this one, Pat was my guide, and we saw this water, and he said, well, I'm not sure how deep it is, but you just watch me and see what happens, and then you just follow me, okay? So you'll see on the next slide how that worked out. This is a photo of a young boy starting a fire in Cambodia during the bike ride, but this was common throughout Asia, even in Vietnam, in the cities, in Hanoi and Ho Chi Minh City, and in Laos. Little fires all over where people were, like where we might in Minnesota use recycling and composting, they burned their leaves and all of the refuse on the side of the streets. And this was just a picture of a kid probably doing the chores for the day. Part of the bike ride into the jungle, tarantulas were common. I did not take this picture. My guide, he has been around tarantulas a lot more than me, so he said he would go in and take a picture with my camera because I had a better camera than him. Anyway, this tarantula was about the size of my fist. And then you'll also see a picture of poisonous snakes that I didn't know were poisonous until after I was taking the picture. This picture is of part of the floating village in Cambodia. There are thousands of people who live on the water in their homes, and you'll see a couple of videos of that too. In Asia, lotus is a plant that is beautiful for their just beautification of flowers, but also the leaves and the edible, the buds. There's many parts to this, but there are many fields of lotus that you would travel through our biking. And here we were kind of got caught in the rain, so we took a break anyway. But just another picture of the fields. So every morning we would get started pretty early, and Pan was our driver. So he would make sure that we would have fruit snacks for after we got going so far. We would always have enough water so that we would be hydrated throughout the trip. And literally, these were the fruit snacks that he would have in his tuk-tuk when he would meet us at a location about 2 hours into our trip. I think it's just noteworthy also just the food that is in Asia was real food, natural food. And while I was active and it was, in the 80 degrees temperature most of the days, I came home after a month and I had lost 10 pounds and I didn't do anything to try to do that. Along the way, we stopped at a monastery, and this is a group of kids that we had been at earlier at a market and bought some snacks, and they came around the tuk-tuk in our bikes and were cute and interested in what we were up to. So we gave them some snacks, and they posed for a picture here. What I understand is that it's kind of like an orphanage. Maybe kids whose parents are no longer able to care for them, kids go to live at the monastery. This is a photo from a small museum in the Siem Reap area that reflected the killing fields. Over 2 million people were killed over a 3-year period. It was an effort from the Khmer Rouge to kill anyone who had any education, any additional languages, any musical talent, any artistic talent, and really just eliminate anyone who wasn't a commoner. So I took this photo. I wasn't supposed to take pictures while I was biking, but as you can see, I did. And I was the only one on the tour, so it's not like you got a group of people. But this photo shows a picture of the Khmer National United Party. And I asked my guide afterward, I'm like, why is that still having a sign of the Khmer? And he said, well, just haven't had time to change the signage. And that was from 1979. So Bangkok was my way to get to Phuket, and there's an incredible history in Bangkok, an incredible population of Bangkok, but incredible gold everywhere you go, temples and Buddhas, and my guide talked a lot to me about all of the meaning of all of the different um, Buddhas that we had visited. This is an area, the second part of my trip in Thailand was to Phuket, which is known for paradise. Many honeymooners go in that area. It's also well known for James Bond movies have been filmed in this area. So lots of tourism, lots of boats coming in and out and coming to see, and people would have an opportunity to jump into the water, which was so beautiful. And again, lovely 80-degree temperatures.
Really? Yum. You get
Well, thank you for your interest in learning about my trip to Asia back in November of 2022. Once again, I feel incredible gratitude to have that privilege to be able to travel to another country and have these experiences and have a rich, better understanding of about other people in our world that we are brothers and sisters in the world. I thank you to Sheila for helping me put this slideshow together, and yeah, if you have any questions, reach out to me. I'd be happy to share this information. And there's a lot more stories behind all of these photos and that month time in Asia. Thanks, and take care of yourselves.